This man kept poking at the desert with a short knife. As a result, the sand began to sink. The man shouted in excitement. The others hear the shouts and rush over. Then the 7 men started digging the sand with their bare hands. After lifting the wooden planks from the well, there was a very deep well below. To find out if there was water in the well, the men threw a stone into the well, but there was no sound of water as they expected. The men were in despair. It's been 5 days since they've had water in the desert. In 2 hours they will die of thirst. The captain didn't want to give up, so he asked Blackie to go down again. Blackie grabbed the raised rocks and slowly climbed down. When he reached the bottom of the well, he found sand all over the ground. Just when Blackie was not expecting anymore, suddenly he felt that the rock was a little damp. Then he followed the dampness downward, and he found a source of water. The man was overjoyed. He cried out in excitement,
"Quick! Quick! Send down a bucket!"
The captain threw down a small canteen. So as not to waste a single drop, he poured the water from his palm into the canteen. He even licked the drops from his palms. The water box was already full. The captain hurriedly asked the team to get 2 more lunchboxes, and finally the lunchboxes were full after 6 hours. The team is carefully pulling up the rope. These 2 boxes of water are not easy to come by. They treasured it very much. The captain ordered them to drink only 2 sips each. The one who took a sip of water said enthusiastically,
"Sweet. Like a woman."
The next day the captain captured 2 enemy soldiers. He learned that they hadn't had any water for 5 days. The captain poured water into a lunchbox and threw it on the ground. The captive shouted out subconsciously. The captain wasted a glass of water, but that was the beginning of his plot. In the desert, the captain faced an enemy army that hadn't had water for 5 days. He threw water on the ground. Then the captain poured another glass of water. This time he didn't throw it on the ground, but used it to seduce the enemy prisoner. He asked him to tell him everything about the enemy troops. The captive said that there were nearly 1,000 of them, several kilometers away, and that all of them had been thirsty for more than 5 days. In order to destroy the enemy, the captain had a plan. He told the 2 prisoners to go back and report to their superiors. Tell them that there is endless water here. If they want to drink it, they can trade their weapons for it. Although the enemy army was many, but without water for 5 days, the enemy must be weak. I believe that as long as they hold the high ground, they would surely win the battle. But soon the bad news came that there was no more water in the wells. In order to achieve a quick victory, they quickly placed mines around the entrance. They placed a sniper on the high ground. Finally, they set up a heavy machine gun at the barricade. And then, all the men went to their posts and waited for the enemy. The enemy is convinced. They heard there was a lot of water here, and they came. Thousands of them came to the gate. A mine exploded. The 2 sides began to fight fiercely, although the enemy army was many. But after 5 days of thirst, the enemy is very weak. They were like living targets. They can't beat them at all. But some of them are still trying their best to get a drink of water. With the 9-member team launching their tanks, the enemy fled. At the end of this fierce battle, the enemy suffered heavy losses, and the 9-member team had lost 1 soldier. However, not long after that, the enemy's commander came here with a white flag. He's here to negotiate. The captain saluted him as a sign of respect, but the enemy officer thought he was just a corporal and had no right to talk to him. He demanded to see the highest officer of the squad. The captain didn't take offense at the slight. Instead, he took his time and told him that his superior was taking a bath in water. The enemy officer pursed his saliva. He was even more convinced that he had found a well, but he didn't know that the well had run out of water hours ago. The Germans hadn't had any water for 5 days. Many of the German soldiers are dying of thirst, but he remained firm and threatened to surrender. When the captain heard that, he turned around and left. He knew the Germans wouldn't last long without water. Just as the captain thought, 10 minutes after the German officer returned, they attacked again. This time the Germans used mortars. This time they used mortars to bombard the 9-man squad. Then the army began to charge. The German soldiers were severely dehydrated and weak. Before they could reach the enemy's position, they fell down one after another. The German commander was not convinced. He ordered the rest of his men to attack from the flanks. They charged forward, one after the other. This way of fighting quickly reduced the Soviet squad to 5 men out of 8. Just as the squad was about to lose its strength, most of the Germans had already collapsed from dehydration. The German commander was at his wit's end. He raised the white flag again and came to negotiate. John came slowly. As soon as he got close to the German officer, John took out his dagger and killed him. Then he shot his attendant. Just when John thought he was safe, the next moment, he was shot by the enemy, who had been waiting for him. The Soviets had lost another man in their squad. The Germans were without a leader. They were in disarray and began to fight indiscriminately. 2 of the Soviets were hit by shells and died instantly. The original 9-man squad was now down to 2. At that moment, the Germans began a large-scale attack. The captain jumped on the tank and tried to shoot to the death, but all the German soldiers raised their rifles and tried to surrender. They went straight for the well. The captain was overjoyed, but what he didn't expect, but to his surprise, the well, which had already dried up, was now gushing with water. It turned out that the intense bombardment had blown open the pipes of the well. While the Germans were drinking water, they captured their weapons. Finally, the 2 men sat leisurely on the tank, controlled a large number of German soldiers. They waited for the arrival of the Soviet army.